Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Reverend Wendy presents a talk that explores and expresses the truths of unity. Reverend Wendy helps us understand that God is all there is and we are one with God, and that there are real-world practical things that we can do to deepen our experience of spirituality and help us in our daily lives.
All right, we are going to start a series devoted to taking a look at Jesus' parables, some of them anyway. How many of you are familiar with Jesus' parables? Raise your hands if you are. That's a small portion of you, a relatively small portion of you, but then you're here, so you're going to know a lot more about them if you stay throughout the month with us as we take a look at these. So first of all, the parables of Jesus are a teaching tool. They are stories. You know, in a New Thought community, there is a wide range in the way and where and how people look at Jesus, who he was, what he was. For me, I have to say that I see him as an elder brother. I see him as a teacher. I see him as a way shower. I do not see him as a savior. I do not see him as the only Son of God. These are straight unity teachings. We see Jesus as an elder brother, as a teacher, as a way shower, as someone who pointed the way to evolving in our consciousness. I love what he stood for. I love the message he gave. I'm not too fond of an awful lot of his fan club, though, because in very many ways, truly in very many ways, I think what he taught has been hijacked, and what he taught has been distorted in such a way and used against people and has alienated people that no wonder why we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you are going to see my Bible, and I have a lot of these in my office and at home. You are going to see my Bible sitting here, and I'll be using it when I talk about the parables throughout this series. Now, for some of you, you may be saying and thinking, it's about time. I like it when that's there. And for others of you, you may be right now trying to see which is the closest exit. Can I get out of here really fast? And to be totally honest with you, I would have been in the latter group before I ever came to Unity. I would have been one that would have wanted to bolt through the doors as fast as I possibly could. So where is the Bible in Unity? The Bible in Unity is a tool that we look at. We're more familiar with it, Unity is a teaching and a movement, than we are any of the other sacred texts. We do pull from all of the world's spiritual traditions and religions, and we look at the sacred texts within all of the world's religions, but we are clearly more knowledgeable about and truly have our roots in Christianity and our roots in this book called the Bible. But we do not take it literally. We do not see it as the inerrant word of God. We do not see it as being infallible. Probably the simplest way of describing how we see it is to say that we are in Unity principle-based, not Bible-based. Principle-based, not Bible-based. And so when we look at the teachings of Jesus, we want to look at them through mystical and metaphysical eyes, because we really feel, especially with regard to the parables, that he was teaching through story and he was teaching through parable. He was teaching through common everyday elements, the kind of elements that his followers were very familiar with. And so in the parables, he uses fish. He talks about fish. He talks about seed. He talks about flour. He talks about wineskins and wine. He talks about everyday elements that his followers were very familiar with. But he shares them in a way where he is trying to help his followers grow and expand in consciousness. In fact, I would say that is the reason that the parables are given to us in the first place, to bring about a change in consciousness. To bring about a change in consciousness. Say that with me. To bring about a change in consciousness. In our spiritual tradition, We know the power of consciousness. We know that we co-create our life experiences through the power of our consciousness. And so to have in Jesus and to have in these parables something that helps us to bring about a change in consciousness means that within these stories, when understood mystically and metaphysically, that we are given some of the very tools to expand and change our consciousness so that we can do what? We can change our life experience. We can change our life experience. So we need to listen to them and listen for the higher truth. Does that make sense? To listen for the higher truth. So the first one we're going to take a look at, the only one we'll look at today, is called the parable of the sower. But I think that's kind of incorrectly titled. I think it's more the parable of the seed and the parable of the soil. So I'm going to read it to you. It's from the book of Matthew, and it is one of the earlier parables that Jesus gives. And I think that in itself is a little bit insightful because in a way, this parable is all about hearing, all about listening, all about engaging the mind. So he says, "Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown." And then he finishes this parable, as he sometimes does with others. "Whoever has ears, let them hear." Whoever has ears, let them hear. Do you think anybody that was listening to him didn't have ears? Chances are very good that they all had ears, right? So in a way, he's chiding them. I would love to have heard the inflections and the tone of voice when he gave these. You know, whoever has ears, let him hear. He's saying, pay attention, listen. Listen. You know, in his day, when sowers sowed seed, they usually carried the seed in like a leather satchel or a cloth satchel, and they would take the seed and they would just throw it, hoping that it would mostly land where they wanted it to land. Very different than the way we plant crops today, right? And so Jesus is trying to paint this picture to help people grow in consciousness. What do each of the key elements stand for? Who is the sower? We would say that the sower is spirit, the sower is God, the sower is that one power and one presence in the universe, the source of all divine ideas, of all spiritual truth. So God is the sower, or spirit, if you prefer that word, or Harry or Sally, or I don't care what word you use, but that ultimate reality is the sower. And the seed, what is the seed? The seed is spiritual truth. The seed is divine idea, the divine idea of love, the divine idea of unity, of oneness, of kindness, of compassion. And what is the soil? This is where it gets really important. The soil represents our mind. The soil represents your consciousness and my consciousness. So what Jesus is laying out here has really nothing to do with harvesting a crop. He's not giving gardening 101. He's giving, in a way, metaphysics 101. He's essentially saying you and I live in an infinite universe with infinite potential in the mind and the heart and the presence of God, the source of all infinite potential and divine ideas. And those divine ideas, that potential is equally available to every single one of us. The seed doesn't change, but what changes and what impacts the yield, whether it's 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold, what impacts that is the soil on which that seed lands. So take a divine idea of love, or take a divine idea of wholeness for a moment. or the divine idea of great good. That divine idea, filtered through our minds, depending upon the level of our consciousness, that divine idea is going to be expressed and take physical form very differently, depending upon the soil in which that divine idea lands. So the seed in this example is essentially the same. The soil is what is the variable. We're going to look now at the different kinds of soil and what it represents in us, because it's about our mind. It's about consciousness. So do you remember the first seed fell where? By the path, alongside the path. Get a vision in your mind of the paths, the footpaths. This is what we're talking about, what Jesus was talking about, the footpaths. They were pretty well trodden. The ground was solid. It was like hard as a rock. And so he's saying the first seed fell by the path. The birds came and ate it up because that seed had no chance to do what? To take root. To take root. Because it was just laying on the top of the soil. And before it could take root, because the soil was so hard, the birds came and snatched it away. What does that kind of soil sound like in terms of a mind? Closed. And not even ajar. Shut, tight, closed. It represents in us a very unresponsive mind, a very rigid mind, a very hard mind, a mind that will not accept anything new, a mind that already has it all figured out and thinks it knows everything. Have you ever met anybody like that? Maybe you have. And if we're honest, maybe sometimes we've experienced and noticed a little bit of that in ourselves as well. What I know to be true is children don't start off that way. You and I did not start off that way. We did not start off with a hardened mind, with a shut down mind. That seed that fell along the path, that couldn't take root, that got snatched up quickly by the birds, not only represents the hardened mind, the unresponsive mind, the closed mind, but also represents the negative mind, the one that always says no to everything. You know, there's no, there's yes, and it's perfectly okay to say, let's wait and see, or maybe to hold space. The second seed, do you remember where that seed fell? In rocky places. Some seed fell in rocky places that didn't have much soil. The seed sprang up how? Quickly. The seed sprang up quickly, came out, the sun came out, and the little plant got what? Scorched. Scorched. What does that represent in us? That represents a mind that initially responds favorably to something, but doesn't have a chance, is fragile, and doesn't put down roots, and quickly withers and dies. Have you ever met people who jump into something full force right away, gangbusters, and no sooner do they jump in that they'll jump right back out? You've never met anybody like that? I've met a lot of people like that. It responds to that aspect of our mind, or that state of consciousness where we're quick to jump in, but we don't realize that it's not just enough to say yes initially to that divine idea, that dream, that possibility. It requires nurturing. It requires some staying power. What is the definition of a professional? One who stays with whatever needs to be done long before the mood passes, right? It's so easy to jump in on the front end of something, but where life really starts to unfold, where we really start to bring about lasting change in our lives, is we can't just say yes and then pull out. We need to stay in the process. We need to stay in the process. It also represents, I think, the mind that is very idealistic, the mind that thinks in beautiful visions and ideal pictures and ideas, but stays stuck there and never gets up off their affirmations to do anything with them. to be over contemplative and underacting, underperforming. So besides the seed that fell on the path, and besides the seed that fell on the rocky places, the third seed fell where? In the thorns. In the thorns. And the thorns did what? Sprang up fast and choked them. What do you think that represents in us? Any idea? Huh? It absolutely could impact and be influenced by who we surround ourselves with. How about, do any of you ever experience this? You have a divine idea, you're working with it, but a part of you believes it, and a part of you is that naysayer and coming up with all the no's and all the problems. Am I the only one that still has that going on sometime? Okay, just wanted to check in because I don't need to talk if you have it all solved. But a lot of us have that going on. You know, a divine idea comes to us, and it feels right, and we take hold with it, and we're even staying with it, and we're working with it. But if we don't discipline our minds to pay attention to that which will feed that idea, it will soon be choked out. Let me read something to you from one of the books that I have turned to over the years to help me with a deeper, richer understanding of the parables. I don't know if the book is still in print. The book was written by Irvin Seal, Irvin with an E, and Seal, S-E-A-L-E. And the title of the book is The Parables of Jesus. And he suggests that the seed that fell among the thorns is the mind that doesn't keep up its prayer work in order to stay healthy. Take that in for a moment. The mind that doesn't keep up its prayer work in order to stay healthy. There's that, I think it's an old Indian sage or teaching that talks about the two rival horses, the white horse and the black horse, or the life horse and the dark horse within us, and how they rival for attention. It's the light and the shadow in us. And the youngster asks of the wise counsel, which one's going to live? Which one's going to live inside of me? And the wise counsel says, whichever one you feed. Whichever one you feed. It's a little bit also like the father who went to Jesus to have Jesus heal his daughter of a serious illness. And one of the very first things Jesus asked the father was, do you believe? And I've told you this many times before, I love the father's very human and very honest response. We're told that the father said, yes, I believe. Help my unbelief. He's clearly saying, I have both of these. I have the two different dynamics going on inside. I believe, help my unbelief. Help me not to feed that unbelief. And we're told in the story of Jesus that the daughter was healed. The daughter was healed. Part of our prayer work, I think, is to ask in prayer, help that doubting part of me. Send it to voicemail. Or say to it, give it a nickname, and tell it, thank you for sharing. I'm busy right now. I'm listening to this one over here. Here's a little more of what Irvin Seal writes. So it is the mind in us that doesn't keep up its prayer work in order to stay healthy. If you are not well grounded in the spiritual law and do not have confidence in your ability to choose, meaning what you're going to listen to within you, the thorns or the fertilizer, if you will. If you are not well grounded in the spiritual law and do not have confidence in your ability to choose, then these two opposites will quarrel in your mind. And in most cases, fear will get the better of faith and choke out the good seed. If this is your present experience, you must diligently school yourself to pray daily, until you invoke the power which will help you to sustain constructive thought and imagery. You cannot think two opposite thoughts at the same time. The attempt to do so will cause them to cancel each other out and vitiate all constructive and concerted movement. This is the law in metaphysics. Just as in physics, the law is that two things cannot occupy the same place at the same time. So how about the fourth soil? How about the seed that fell on the fourth soil? What was the fourth soil? I always say this is the happy ever after of the parable. It was a good soil, right? He's saying that some of the seed fell on good soil. And do you remember what he said about the seed that fell on the good soil? It multiplied 30, 60, 100 times over. Would you like to see your good multiplied 30, 60, 100 times over? I certainly would. I certainly would. So what is that good soil? That good soil is the opposite of the other things we were just talking about. That good soil is permeable. That good soil is broken open. Did a whole lesson with you not too long ago about how oftentimes the very most painful experiences in our lives that break us open are the very ones that will help us to birth the new version of ourselves and the new life that we long to be stepping into and living in. We've got to get the significance of the fact that we live, every single one of us lives in the infinite field of potential, the same infinite field of potential. You don't live in a field of potential any different than the most successful person you can think of or the least successful person you can think of. We all live in the same infinite field of divine potential, of infinite possibility. That is true. With that being true, then why is it not showing up equally or more equally all around us in the lives that people live? What must be the variable? What must be the variable is the soil and the consciousness, right? Also, clearly where we are starting from makes a huge difference. That's a whole other lesson. Let's stay with the part, though, that it is our consciousness that is that variable. And so how open are we to new divine ideas? When we sit and we pray for greater good in our lives and we get something that feels like we are supposed to step out and do something different, or an invitation to grow beyond our comfort zone, like when JJ asked Robin, would you please share? And her first thought was probably, I'd really rather do a lot of other things than stand up here and talk, and especially about this topic, right? Sometimes life gives us the divine idea or the opportunity in meditation, and sometimes it might come through the invitation of someone else that is presenting us with the possibility. However, what does our mind do with that? Do we shut it down and say, oh, I can't do that? I quit speech class the first time they told me I needed to give a talk. I can't possibly do that. Or we have that negativity going on inside, that self-doubt going on inside. What are we feeding? What are we listening to? That is what makes all the difference in the world in terms of what it is that we are going to bring forth. And what's so powerful and important for us to realize is the cultivation and the fertilizing of that soil, if you will, lies clearly within us. Each and every one of us has the ability to grow in our awareness, to grow in consciousness. And we also, besides having the ability to do that, and within these teachings, the tools to do that, we also live in a community that is designed to support and encourage us in that work. You heard Astrid announce the start of our life groups. The tagline for our life groups is doing life together. When we get together and we support one another in these spiritual ideas, in these spiritual practices, we will find that that kind of gathering and that kind of support really helps to aerate the soil of our minds, if you will. That really helps us not just to jump into an idea and then not have the staying power to do the inner work, because we'll be encouraged by others that are walking a similar path, by others that are walking and trying to bring forth that 30-fold, that 60-fold, that 100-fold of good in their life. Let me close with another part of a reading from Irvin Seal's book. He says, so we come to this great truth that our ability to receive from others or from life itself, to receive either good or bad, depends entirely upon what we are in ourselves. We have always known that our ability to influence others depends upon what we are in consciousness, and how we must enlarge our conception to see that what we get and what we give depend upon what we are. All our life on this planet is getting and giving. To the superficial mind, it is the getting and the giving of things. To the wise mind, it is the getting and giving of consciousness. If we are wise, then we shall work upon ourselves and condition our soil to receive and to respond to the seed of God, which is constantly being broadcast upon it. If we have not enough health or strength or love or money or friends, let us know that it is not because of a lack of these things in the universe. That is so important to grasp. It is not because of a lack of these things in the universe. Let us look to our soil. Let us develop the soil, and the seeds which are in it will sprout and grow. Namaste.
The Unity Center, spiritually progressive, socially responsive, radically inclusive. We have services on Sundays at 9 and 11. Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.